Hello everybody and welcome back to Grimdork Minis. Today we're going to be painting up the poster boys for Warhammer 40k, the Ultramarines. Let's grab our brushes and codex, and let's get rolling. Today we are going to be painting the generic Primaris Lieutenant. This is going to be my first time painting an Ultramarine, and I wanted to do this to be a bit of a trial and error, figuring out the scheme that works for us and how to fit this into our painting style. To begin our base coat, over a Zenithal Prime we're going to layer Kantor Blue as our midtone. This gives us a great rich blue as a jumping off point for our armor. The key to Space Marine armor is a gradient, so we're going to be working in small color jumps from here to achieve that. We're not going to be using any airbrush, so it's all going to be brushwork. The Ultramarines have given the game of Warhammer a lot. Between being a recognizable face for the franchise, and especially now with Space Marine 2 coming out. People seem to be flocking to the hobby, and if that's what landed you here, welcome. In this paint job, we're going to aim to do the Sons of Guilliman proud. As we begin to highlight our armor, we're going to slowly mix in Lothern Blue into our Kantor Blue, slowly increasing the ratio to brighten us up. We're starting with a roughly 3-to-1 mix of Kantor to Lothern, but eventually we'll get to a straight Lothern Blue. When doing this, we don't want to work with straight paint. We want to make sure to dilute this just with a touch of water, or just use a wet palette to ensure a smooth application. One thing that I notice with a lot of beginner painters is coffee staining on their models. Most of the time, this is because you touch your paint once it's begun to dry. In this step, it's not going to look super clean, super consistent. That's okay. We're going to clean it up down the line. Remember, it is better to add more paint later to fix a mistake than attempt to do it before your previous layer is dry. Just give it a minute and then go back to it. When we're doing our highlights, we want to focus on the edges of surfaces, but most importantly, the areas where light will be hitting. When you're working with a brush, where you start and finish your stroke really matter. As soon as your brush strikes the model, it's depositing the least amount of paint for your stroke. Place your brush where you want your highlight to begin, and then pull it to wherever you want the most paint to be deposited. Your endpoint will leave behind the most paint, so make sure this point is wherever you intend on having the most striking highlight. The Ultramarines are one of the most iconic Space Marine chapters in the Warhammer 40k universe. Known for their discipline, strategic acumen, and adherence to the Codex Astartes, a set of guidelines for Space Marine organization and tactics, they hail from the planet Macragge. Their blue armor, adorned with gold and a distinctive symbol of a stylized U, signifies their allegiance. The chapter is a storied history, playing pivotal roles in many significant battles, and led by their Primarch, Rabute Guilliman. The Ultramarines are often seen as paragons of the Imperium, representing the hope and strength of humanity against the myriad threats of the galaxy. Now onto the pure Lothern Blue. This we'll use selectively to build up a bit more brightness. You want to water this down a bit more than our previous layers, and we can do a heavy stipple on the smooth areas to add to our gradient. We also want to create a scratchy edge highlight instead of a pure edge highlight, just to give our armor a bit of texture and a bit of wear. To finish our highlight, we're going to give a couple hard edge highlights. To do this, go ahead and get a sharp tip brush and then drag the side of it about a 45-degree angle across the edge you want to highlight. You're going to get a perfect edge every time instead of using the tip. We also want to add a bit more stippling to our flat panels, and this is going to boost our brightness and add in a bit more texture to our armor. For metallics, I'm going to use the Speedpaint Hoplite Gold. I haven't used the Speedpaint metallics before, so this was a bit of a trial and error process, so I figured why not. Overall, I'm pretty impressed. It covered really well in one go. One big thing with metallics for me is that it wasn't overly glittery, which I really like. You couldn't see the actual flakes of, aluminum or whatever it else is that's mixed in there, so I really loved that. Besides that, it went on really smooth, dried consistent, and was applied in one coat. For the silver and steel details, I used Broadsword Silver, Speedpaint as well. Much the same as the gold, I think it covered really well, but with this one I could see some visible flakes. It could have been due to me kind of slapping it on and then moving on to the next thing, but I'm not overly sure. I'm going to have to do a little bit more trial and error with this one. For all of our joints, we're going to use Rattling Grime. As with our previous models, we want to focus on a few key details. That's going to be our armor, the gold details in our face, and then some other ones are going to fall to the wayside. If we don't end up kind of sectioning these off, either our models are going to take forever or just not going to be completed in any reasonable amount of time. So for this, Rattling Grime, one coat, done deal. Onto our face. So the Ultramarines hail from the planet Macragge. It's a cold, desolate place, so when I'm working with a kind of a colder area, I want to bring a bit of warmth to his face, as if he's been out in the cold fighting. When you were a kid, you would go out in the snow, you would come back in, your cheeks were flush and red, so that's what we kind of want to emulate here. So we're going to start with a base coat of Bugman's Glow to achieve this effect. To highlight our skin, we're going to use the same process that we did for the armor. So that's going to be adding in more and more of our highlight color, Kislev Flesh, to our base tone, Bugman's Glow, as we move up in brightness and tone. So when painting faces, we want it to stand out. Your eyes are drawn to the face, and if they don't look right, your whole model is going to be a bit off, even though it's just such a small part. This hits a bit of a stage of the uncanny valley, where it's appearing human, but it's clearly not quite human. So for this, each successive layer of paint, we want to continue to brighten up our face. The first pass, probably about 80% of the face we want to cover of our base tone, and then from there, the next 60%, 40, 20, and so on, until we are just highlighting the brows, nose, and cheekbones in our final highlight. And we've got some great camera work here for me. For the eyes, if you could see what I was doing, I get a really sharp brush and do a quick pass of gray seer. As you can see here, I'm using an eye loop. You can get them really cheap, and they might look a little ridiculous, but they really help with hitting the small details. A little hobby hack that I found with doing pupils. You get a really sharp tip pen with a felt tip, and use this to dot your pupil. It's going to give you a perfect circle, and best of all, if you hit it with water within the first about 15 minutes of doing it, it'll come off without any issue, won't leave behind any residue, and you can just try again. Our belt holster and pouches are another one of those details that's going to get skipped. So we're going to do a quick base coat of Rhinox hide, and then in a couple steps here, we're going to hit it with a highlight of Doombull brown and nothing much else. For our accent color, we're going red. So our cloak and plasma pistol will get a base coat of Khorne red for our shade color. It's going to contrast really nicely against the blue armor and make it really stand out. Our midtone for our reds is going to be Mephiston red. I really want this red to pop up, so we're going to do large jumps in vibrancy here. And we're going to finish off our red details with Evil Sun's Scarlet. Super vibrant, it's like one of the best red paints that I've worked with, so you want to focus this on the edges and on the flaps of the cloak. Next we'll do a quick wash of Reichland Flesh Shade over our gold details. Washes are great, don't get me wrong, but when I use them I really try to babysit them and make sure they don't just sit around and pool. If you use it and forget it, you end with pooling, or maybe gravity takes it somewhere you don't want it to be. So once you apply it, and before it begins to dry, that part's important, move it around to get exactly what you want. So I've had this model sitting around unpainted for ages. I'm not really a Space Marine guy, so I have no idea where my transfer sheet that I got with this model got to. So we're going to freehand the various symbols on his armor. On his left pad, as with all Ultramarines, we'll give him that Ultramarine U. With freehanding, there are a couple things to remember. 1, thin your paints to where they easily flow off your brush, and 2, you can always repaint the base coat of whatever you're painting over and then restart if it's not going the way you want it to. I actually did this one way too big and had to come back in later and redo it. Of course, the camera was out of focus on try number 2, so all you get is the messy first attempt I did. For his knee pad, I'm just going to divide this into 4s and pick out the top left and bottom right with Lothern blue to give it a bit of variety. The mark of an Ultramarine lieutenant is the skull pauldron on his right shoulder pad. So on his right side, we're going to do a skull with a little red bit on top. To base coat our skull, I'm going to use gray Seer. For the red details on the skull, I'm going to be using Mephiston red. With this, I want a nice vibrant coat right from the beginning. I don't want to have to try and hit these same little fiddly lines more than once. So if you're not happy, remember you can always clean up around the area with the same blue we used for a base coat and just try again. For the eye holes, teeth, and outline of the skull, I used rattling grime, applying very small amounts at any one time, not letting it pool. Alright, and we're past the hard part, the fiddly details of freehanding, so now we just have a few more details to do before we wrap up our model. We're going to highlight all of our metallics with silver. It's going to really brighten it up and draw the eye, but we want to be pretty sparing with this on the gold details because we don't want to take away the impression that it's actually gold. For the wax of our purity seals, we're going to be basing these with Screamer Pink and then highlighting with Pink Ore. Just a couple dots of that highlight color will do the job. The paper of our purity seals will be base coated in XV88 and then highlighted with a Morghast bone. And to bring our armor together, and because I feel that our armor actually got a little bit too bright through all of this, we're going to go with a wash of all of the armor with Nuln Oil. With this, make sure that you don't let it pool anywhere. I really recommend before you actually apply to the model to drop it onto a wet palette so you can kind of control how much you're having on your brush at any one time. When you're doing the full body, it is really easy to forget an area, and then all of a sudden you've got a puddle and coffee staining everywhere. Just make sure to babysit this, get it in exactly into the recesses where you want it before you move on to the next area. You've seen me do this a couple times at this point, but for the plasma glow, we're going to base coat it with any white paint that you've got. We are then going to drop some Aethermatic blue to give it that bright blue glow. And that's going to be our model finished, and now a completed model isn't complete without a base. So we're going to do a quick wash of Citadel's Wyldwood over our Zenithal base coat. This is going to give us a wet, muddy look with no real-time investment for us. Let's have our blue boys fighting in the snow. To mix this up, I'm going to pour some Army Painter Snow and mix in a good squirt of gloss varnish to give it some shine and make it appear wet. Then we're going to finish this off with a couple drops of Speedpaint Caribbean Ocean to give it that blue hue of a fresh, wet snow. We can then spread this over the base, making sure to clump it in a couple spots because it's going to pile up places, and make sure to get a little bit on our grass tuft that we've got there. So when a lot of people are doing snow bases, I see people put snow on the shoulders. I don't really prefer to do that because in my mind we're painting moving soldiers, the stuff's not going to really collect like that, and we're not painting statues, so it wouldn't kind of collect there and get there over time. And there we have it, one Ultramarine painted. For this, we set out to try a couple new things, and I think it worked out mostly how I would have liked. I think I went a bit too bright with the armor, so now I know for next time, tone it down just a bit. Overall, I'm really happy to see our hobby continuing to grow, and I think that Space Marine 2 can only help the community, and I'm happy to see where it takes us and see the new painters that it brings in and see how they progress. If you guys wouldn't mind giving a like and a subscribe, it really helps grow the community, and I would greatly appreciate it. Alright guys, I will catch you in the next one. Have a good one.